Michael Pickens is the CEO of Botanical Enlightenment, a holistic supplement manufacturer focused on providing natural alternatives for people and pets fighting cancer through supplements and nutrition. Collaborating with a network of naturopathic doctors, he promotes a whole food, minimally processed diet tailored to blood type while discouraging excessive consumption of sugar, seed oils, and chemical-laden foods. In part 1 of our 2-part conversation, we explore the origin story that led him to start his company, tensions between modern and natural medicine, and what distinguishes medicinal uses of CBD and THC from recreational or stoner culture. We also discuss the healing properties of pumpkins and mushrooms featured in Michael's remedies. I'm Sienna Mae Heath, and this is Food is Freedom. Well, Michael, I've really been looking forward to this, and we've been in touch, of course, due to our connectedness over plant medicine, growing our own food and flowers, and your own approach through your business of Botanical Enlightenment in creating certain natural remedies. I'd love to give you the opportunity, of course, to introduce yourself, and also let's explore your origin story, which was initially rather tragic and hard, losing both of your grandmothers on the same day to cancer when you were 15 and 16. And what that time in your life was like and how it's motivated you to pave the path that you're on now.
Absolutely. Sienna, thank you so much for having me on the show. So, a little bit about my background. I used to be in politics. I'm the CEO of Botanical Enlightenment. We manufacture nutritional health supplements. But what really got me on my path, both health wise and in politics, was both of my grandmas passing when I was 15. Both of my grandmas got diagnosed with cancer. My mom's mom had pancreatic cancer. My dad's mom had breast cancer. They both went through chemotherapy and radiation. They were both diagnosed around the same time, started chemo and radiation around the same time, and died on the exact same day. It was Thanksgiving when I was 15 that they both passed. And I don't believe that they died from the cancer. I believe that they died from the chemo and the radiation. You know, their hair fell out. They got jaundice in their eyes. They couldn't keep food down. So I believe that they were literally poisoned by the medical system that claims to help people. And that's what got me on this path. Now I can go into that medical system and what I think about it if you want. Um, but
I would love to hear your thoughts on that. And I'm also curious, personally, at what point did you sense that it was the chemo and radiation rather than the cancer itself? You were 15, so
yep.
when was that seed planted for you?
It was probably in my early 20s when I started really questioning everything. It was the 2007, 2008 presidential election. And I remember watching the first Republican debate, and Ron Paul was on stage, and they called him a libertarian. And he said all these things that were like, I've never heard before. So I started doing more research on what a libertarian was. And then that got me down the rabbit hole of all kinds of stuff, the Federal Reserve and cannabis legalization and decriminalization of drugs and all kinds of stuff, right? You go down those rabbit holes and you start learning about things. And through the decriminalization movement, I started learning about the medicinal benefits of the cannabis plant. And as a teenager, I smoked weed and started learning more and doing more research on all the studies. Rick Simpson was big in the cannabis space at that time, along with Steve Cubby, and they were using cannabis to heal themselves and to heal other people from cancer. And that really got me down the path of the scientific information around cancer, what causes cancer, and then how the system has just been set up to basically extract as much money from these cancer patients as possible. And at the same time, it's causing so much harm. And it doesn't it doesn't really make any logical sense when you look at all the information and the data and the studies that are out there on all these different natural remedies for cancer. And then you look at the Western medical system and the FDA and the American Cancer Society. All of these organizations say there is no cure for cancer, and seeing this on a daily basis currently, because we manufacture products for people with cancer and for dogs with cancer, and just hearing the stories of what's coming out of these oncologist offices. We recently had a lady, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she came back to us and said, oh, well, my doctor says there's no studies around CBD or cannabis, and that stuff, it probably isn't going to work. And at the same time, she also said that her doctor did not advise her to remove sugar from her diet. Like there's all these things that, we know that cancer is fed by sugar. Most types of cancer are like this. And for an oncologist to basically say that, nutrition and diet has nothing to do with the cancer and they just need to take chemotherapy and radiation, it just blows my mind that this is still going on to this day. And it is the vast majority of oncologists are still pushing these type of treatments.
Well, I think I don't want to say good reason, but I think there's understandable reason that there's a stigma around plant medicine, because when many of us hear plant medicine, our minds always just go to getting high. Oh, plant medicine. Like, who says that? In your social circle, you think of the one like stoner. And that is a subculture that exists.
Mhm.
And kind of regardless of the criminalization or decriminalization of cannabis, there's still this kind of like shifty, maybe I shouldn't be attributing like adjectives because I can get judgy, but there's an energy in that subculture that is different from the energy or the vibe, as kids would call it these days,
Mhm.
of where botanical enlightenment is and where it's headed,
Sure.
in more structured medicinal properties and products. Could you walk us through, well, first your opinions on the differentiation between the two subcultures, and then how you differentiate yourself and what your process is like of extracting CBD and THC, and what products are you creating as a result?
Absolutely. So you have the typical cannabis subculture, 420, all right, getting stoned. Now, I have absolutely nothing against that. I think people should be able to. However, there are some dangers that we're seeing now with use of high amounts of THC, cannabis induced psychosis. They're seeing that because the products are becoming more and more potent. You've got distillate out there that's 80 to 90% THC that people are ingesting, and it can get dangerous. And we're seeing those issues come around. However, for the most part, smoking weed, I still do that. It's not that big of a deal. Now, you do got to pay attention to who's growing it, what pesticides they're using, just like you would if you're eating food, vegetables out of your garden. You want to make sure that they aren't covered in nasty pesticides, because if you smoke it, you're inhaling it, right? But that's a different issue in and of itself. Now, my background, I got into the cannabis industry back in 2013. They had just legalized in Washington State in 2014. And I started doing sales and marketing for some cannabis companies here and helped them grow to be some of the largest cannabis companies in Washington State. So I'm very familiar with that. Drove around to retail stores and dispensaries. That was my full-time job for years. So meeting bud tenders and, having after events where we go smoke pot, and they're able to try it and then they go and buy it for their store, right? So I was part of that. Now I got tired of that, because my main focus and the reason getting involved with it was the medicinal side. So I was able to open a retail store, and then we started manufacturing our own CBD products. Now, the retail store that we opened was an apothecary. We had a lot of different nutritional supplements. We still have one. We still have an apothecary. But what happened was we had customers that were trying these products from other companies that we had on our shelves, and they were bringing them back saying it wasn't working, it wasn't helping their pain, it wasn't helping their insomnia, it wasn't helping this. And we sent some of them off for testing, and the testing came back with much lower levels of CBD than it was on the bottle. Right. So they were basically lying, the companies were. And then that got me down the path of, okay, well, how do we manufacture this ourselves? Because then I can make sure there's the right amount of CBD, that we're not screwing people, that they're able to get the medicine that they need. And a lot of the times people don't realize it, but with CBD, the products that are on the market right now, when you go to Walgreens or wherever else and you get a CBD product, it's got only 500 milligrams or 1,000 milligrams. It's not a therapeutic dose. It's not going to do anything for cancer, right? You have to take a lot more. For example, some of the studies out there, success studies on cancer, is that an adult male needs to take like 300 milligrams of CBD a day to fight cancer. And that's the therapeutic dose. So we manufacture a 10,000 milligram tincture, because we understand that it's those high levels of CBD is what's going to cause the cancer cell apoptosis, which is cancer cell death, and keep it from also replicating rapidly as well. So more of the medicinal focus, less of the recreational focus. Now, I know I brought up Rick Simpson. And for those listening who are familiar with Rick Simpson oil, and for those who aren't, Rick Simpson basically pioneered an extraction method of using alcohol to extract the CBD and THC really from the cannabis flower. Now, his method uses a high THC indica plant. Now, indicas are the cannabis strains that make you stoned. Indica in the couch, like you're very body heavy, right? You don't really want to do anything. You want to eat a lot of food. You want to sit and watch TV and laugh and do all that stuff, right? We use a high CBD sativa. Excuse me. We use a high CBD sativa in our extractions. And the reason why is because we don't want people to just get stoned. And we've also seen people using the high THC indicas. It's also causing memory issues and some other issues. Like most of the customers that we have are older, right? They're 50 plus. They just got diagnosed with cancer. They still have to work, or they still have kids, or they have grandkids, and they still need to be able to function. And you just can't function when you're taking something that's like 80% THC. You're just stoned all the time. And that's not really a way to live either. And most people can't, function like that from day to day. So our product doesn't get anyone high, and it also fights cancer at the same time. So that's kind of the difference between the culture, the culture shift.
The culture shift, yeah. Well, and the not getting high part is ideal for, I imagine, many of your clientele. Unfortunately, I lost my dad to cancer last year,
Oh
and
no.
he was diagnosed with stage 4, and he lived nearly like the 5 years that he was given. He was given 3 to 5 years, and it might have been almost to the day that he lived out that time. But he being diagnosed with stage 4 and having, his own preferences, I think out of fear, just feeling like he's running out of time, decided to go mainly the modern medicine route. Do you have any clients who are kind of on the fence, or who are combining the two approaches?
Yeah, so we've helped hundreds of people. Now, the biggest challenge that we've had working with naturopathic doctors, we used to run a funnel advertising campaign, and the hardest thing was to get people to try something different than what their oncologist was telling them. And most of our customers are only using natural methods. We found that most oncologists are very hostile to any other path, if you will. And we have had customers who were successful using both chemotherapy, radiation, and our products. We actually have a video of one really recent, a gentleman named Jeremy. He had colon cancer, and he's been using our products for 2 years, but he also did chemo and radiation. Now, our products were able to help mitigate the symptoms of the chemo and radiation. He was able to sleep just fine. He didn't lose his hair. He didn't have nausea, whereas a lot of those people do. So for people who are going the Western medicine route, chemotherapy and radiation, our products can help them as well. So, there was probably some of the ancillary benefits of fighting the cancer and causing the cancer cell apoptosis at the same time, in Jeremy's case, along with the chemo and radiation. But most of our customers, they're just going all natural because of the fear that of them seeing other people go through chemo and radiation, right? So there's two kinds of fear in this situation. Like your dad's situation, he was probably very afraid and just decided to go the Western medicine route because that's what he has been programmed to trust growing up throughout his childhood and adolescence. And that's kind of how it works. We're brought up in a system where we see the doctor once a year. If we get sick, we go in, they tell us what to do, and it just becomes part of who we are subconsciously. So they have to be able to open up to try something new. You have to break through all that programming, that years and years of programming from your parents. When you get sick, you go to the doctor, you go to the doctor, you go to the doctor. Everyone gets plugged into health insurance when they start a new job, and then you go to the doctor when you're sick. And so there's a lot of subconscious stuff that's built into that. And the fear, what I find, and I use fear as an acronym, FEAR, fantasized experiences appearing real, right? So the fear there is that they're going to die unless they go see the oncologist what they know, right? Instead of going and looking at other options, like, hey, maybe there's some other things that these oncologists don't know about. So the fear there is holding them back from basically expanding their consciousness in the space of plant medicine.
It's interesting, though, that some of your clients have made other decisions out of fear of going through chemo.
Yep.
I imagine that that's perfectly natural, too. Well, it's literally natural.
It is.
Yeah. Well, my dad would be proud of that joke. Not that it was intended, but there is a movement towards growing your own food and flowers, your own herbs in particular.
Yep.
And I don't know about you, but I really noticed a shift in 2020 when many of us were quarantined in the spring, and some of my friends who had never gardened before, like, were just, for lack of better words, hungry for information. And in a way, also kind of bored. And they see me growing my seedlings and see maybe their neighbors, oh, what are they doing? And they weren't home from their, if they had jobs in offices, like, they hadn't been home to see some of those slower moments in their regions. As we see that embracing and that drive, I also see in your products that you use two vegetables, one being pumpkin and one being mushroom. So where do you get those, and how are you integrating those into your products?
Yeah, so we have a couple different growers that specialize in different mushroom strains, right? We get a separate, we get turkey tail, which we use in some of our cancer products, in our Fantastic Four and our super shrooms. And turkey tail has been proven to be anti-cancer. So we've got a local source for the turkey tail. And then an old friend grows lion's mane, maitake, shiitake, some other mushrooms out in Spokane. So we're getting them as local as possible. I know these people. I know the people who grow all of our hemp plants, right? They're using natural methods. They're not using pesticides and other things like that. So it's very important with, the stuff on the market, and you don't really know what's out there and where it's grown or who is growing it or how they're growing it. It's just very difficult, especially with mushrooms, because there's a lot of companies that are using mycelium, which is basically the root structure. And they're growing it with oats or brown rice, and they're drying it out and then grinding it all up. So there's the fruiting body, and then there's the root structure, and that's a mycelium. So they're grounding it all up and then putting into products. Paul Stamets is well known for using mycelium in his products, and he is selling the fruiting body to pharmaceuticals and some other organizations as well. So you have to be really careful that the products you're getting are fruiting body, not mycelium, because then there'll be the brown rice or the oats mixed in as well, with the mushrooms.
Interesting. And what about the
Yep.
pumpkins?
So the pumpkin, we only use that in one product, and that is for dogs. So we have a product for gut healing. We have a probiotic, and then the pumpkin power, and that's really just for dogs. So
Okay. Well, I've been
yep.
meaning to ask you actually, why dogs and not cats?
Well, so the reason why we went with dogs and not cats is that dogs are less picky with what they're eating. So the powders that we manufacture, they're basically food toppers. Most dogs will eat them just fine along with their food. Cats, not so much. They have a much more difficult time. Now, the CBD tinctures, we have numerous stories of cats overcoming cancer using our pet CBD. So the CBD is just fine with cats because you just drop it in their mouth. Once that liquid's in their mouth, they can't do anything about it. It's kind of there. So they're swallowing it down anyways. But there isn't a particular, like, we have nothing against cats. We have a rescue cat at home. I have two rescue dogs, but we do have a rescue cat. So
Well, Matt Kibbe here at Free the People will say that cats are libertarians, and it
yes.
makes sense why they would be, I guess, more picky or prone to resist.
resist resist something that's good for them. But our, we feed our cat meat, so our cat gets raw meat. She loves it.
Yeah. Well, just considering like a little bit more of like an ideological angle to food and herbal medicine, if we could just get back to like the CBD,
Hmm.
THC, there, in addition to people just like not wanting to get high, or if they're older, of course, wanting to maintain memory, there are people also that have like a certain belief system that's against even using those products. Have you had any clients who have posed those concerns for more like ideological reasons, or
Hmm.
do you have like an idea of what you might say to someone like that?
Yeah, so we have, really conservative customers that are still, bought in with the stigma that cannabis is dope and that CBD is dope, and they don't want to be a dope user, or they don't want to be a pothead, or the whole reefer madness type stuff, like, oh, it's going to make them do all these crazy things, and that goes back to the subconscious programming, because that's what they were taught and that's what they believed. And they, because it's been illegal for so long, they don't want to break any laws, right? So it's actually easier for them to buy from us because most of our products are non-intoxicating, and they're ordering it online and it gets shipped to them discreetly. So they're not having to go into a dispensary. They're not having to go into a weed store and, have to deal with anything from that culture whatsoever. So it actually works out better for them, you know. But the subconscious programming that is involved with this is something that we really have to overcome. And it's not just for them taking the CBD products, but we've been going through a more holistic approach where we're looking at everything. We work with naturopathic doctors that will sit down with people and go through their diets, go through their nutrition, go through their exercise or their movement or their non-movement, right? And what they're eating. And what I found over the years is that a lot of the stuff that people are doing is just programmed and ingrained in the subconscious mind. I just finished up my new book called A Liberated Mind, and it's all about how do we identify these subconscious belief patterns that are causing the habits and the actions that we're taking on a daily basis that are hurting ourselves, right? That are causing disease in our bodies. Most people don't realize it, that, if you're eating sugar every single day, you're going to eventually have issues, diabetes, cancer, something is going to come up, inflammation, and we are hurting ourselves, and our subconscious mind and our ego structure is, unfortunately damaging people's bodies at the same time. So being able to help someone overcome a sugar addiction, right? Or an addiction to just being sedentary, of watching 5 hours of shows straight and not moving, right? And then, throwing some processed food in the microwave. Like, these are deep seated beliefs that people have done for years. You know, you have to look at, and as a libertarian, I've looked at a lot of the psychology behind the welfare state and why the welfare state even exists. And a lot of it is because people are programmed into dependency on a system that has really damaged society, right? And when it was established as kind of like a safety net, but it has become a system of oppression, basically psychological oppression. Because let's say generations are plugged into the food stamp system and the welfare system, and that's what they know. That's all they've known for generations. And it's so difficult to open someone's eyes and open someone's mind to something new. And in that system, they're feeding people this garbage, poisonous, toxic food with food dyes and high fructose corn syrup and all kinds of stuff. You can see it if you go to a grocery store, like these people who are obviously, really inflamed. You can see it in their face. They're overweight. They have a hard time moving around, and their carts are full of cereal and frozen foods and ice cream and all this stuff that the system that has been created is funding. We're funding their health crises, and then the only solution that they have is to go see the doctor that says, oh, it has nothing to do with your diet. Here, take these pills, right? Here, take this insulin. Here, take this. But it has nothing to do with your diet. And we know that's true because if you go into any hospital cafeteria, you're going to find soda. You're going to find highly processed desserts and other foods like that. You're going to be able to get chips and, Doritos. The whole system is setting people up for failure, right? So, and you got to look at some of the root reasons, and it's primarily financial, I believe, because once someone is plugged into that system, like, they have to keep buying from the system. So unless someone else comes in and opens their mind, because it's very difficult for someone to do that. The same mind that created the problem is not the one that can, provide the solution. So,
Well, not I would say not necessarily. I think the individual, I know from personal experience, can
mhm,
more organically discover solutions like really from the land, which I
mhm,
don't. If you grow your own food, that you'll find like the other day I found uh, the land just provided a companion plant for my strawberries. Like I don't have to even go looking for that information, although I have the information, but sometimes
mhm.
there's something greater that does provide the wisdom or plants the seed, so to speak.
Yep.
And I would also add, I think what we're getting at when you mention the root cause of issues is a preventative method rather than always trying to fix. Of course, things come
Mhm,
up like cancer that do require healing. At the same time, some plants that come to mind that are anti-cancer, they have healing properties. They'll not only prevent but to some extent also heal cancer, like butterfly pea. It's a really beautiful blue flower on a
mhm.
vine that makes like just a vibrant blue tea. My dad would drink nettle tea that I bought him a whole bag. He actually never finished it because it was that big of a bag. But respectfully, some of those plants only go so far when
Mhm.
you've got, for example, stage 4, stage 5. But when you're in the more preventative stage of life, how would you recommend in terms of diet or remedies such as what you might provide, just
Yep.
maintaining good health and a good immune system?
Yeah, so I am not someone who is interested in any of the extreme type diets, the people who are doing all carnivore or all vegan or all this or all that. I mainly promote a whole food diet. The less processing, the better. The less seed oils, the better. Just, vegetables, meat, keep it as natural as possible. That's really what I promote. Now, we do have naturopathic doctors that do blood type diets. So apparently, every different blood type has a different diet that actually works better for them. So we promote that. And I let the naturopathic doctors handle that independently, one-on-one with customers. But I like to talk about that they need to start looking at these things, the nutrition and their diet. And, it sounds like you are one of the people who search for knowledge, right? Where your mind is open, that there's some things out there that you don't know, right? And that the more you know, that there's even more out there that you don't know. And if we can get more people to think like that, now it doesn't mean like every time you find some new information, you believe it, right? Every time you find new information, you go, oh, cool, new information. And then you run it through some filters, and then you look at, evidence to see if the new information is true or false or somewhere in the middle, and whether you want to take it on as a belief structure or not, right? But you at least have that in your head, that there is good information out there that you might not know. Whereas most people are like, oh, the oncologist knows everything about cancer, and I'm just going to listen to everything he has to say, instead of the reality of maybe that person doesn't know everything, and maybe there's other information out there. And we can use this in pretty much any aspect of our life. But when it comes to cancer, there's so much information out there that's being suppressed. I can't say that our product helps with cancer for humans. Now, dogs are different. We can actually say that. But for humans, I can't say that, because I might get in trouble by the FDA. Well, maybe not RFK's FDA, but from previous administrations, they're more zealous about going after companies that are making, medical claims. So
I think many of us are intrigued by the new administration's MAHA movement,
yeah.
and there's a lot of good that comes with that. Just kind of like as a thought experiment and to keep our minds open. Is there anything that's happening with the FDA or with regards to health and medicine these days, like in the upper government sectors, that is giving you pause?
I think the banning of things kind of gives me pause. I know banning of the food dyes and banning of artificial ingredients, because I am a voluntarist, I think that a lot of the laws like that might be detrimental, but at the same time, the system is set up to where, like, these companies are actively poisoning people. So I'm kind of conflicted, with what's going on. However, I like the questioning that's happening. There's going to be, studies on vaccines and the efficacy of vaccines and the safety of vaccines, where before there wasn't any studies, and they were just allowed to release new vaccines, regardless of any of the damage that they may or may not cause, which is insane in my mind, that this was even happening, right? So there's a lot of good things that I see happening. The questioning of traditional Western medicine practices, of the food system, and the ingredients that are being put in our food and our water. There's a lot of stuff that's built in that I don't agree with. For example, the organic certification. If you ever go on the USD website and you look at it, there's over 240 inorganic ingredients that are allowed to be included in organic products. They could spray your fruit with chlorine and slap an organic label on it. Like, chlorine is not organic at all. So you don't want to drink chlorine. It's poisonous, but the companies are allowed to spray it on food, right? So one thing that we do with all of our products, and especially, now with the pet supplements, is that we test all of our products for pesticides, heavy metals, mycotoxins, and microbials, right? So we actually go beyond what's required from the USDA organic label. So, and especially with the dog products, if you look at any dog supplement out there, right, they don't have any safety testing. Most companies don't have any safety testing. We were just recently endorsed by Howie Mandel. And one of the reasons why is because we had all this extra levels of testing that most dog supplement companies don't, because the rules and regulations around them are pretty much non-existent, right? But we're using human grade ingredients because we started as a company making supplements for humans. So we're using those same standards for our dogs. Why would we want to feed our dogs something that could potentially have pesticides and heavy metals and all these other things that are going to hurt them, and could cause cancer? because cancer in dogs is a huge epidemic right now. There's over 3 million dogs every year that get diagnosed with cancer. And the dog life expectancy has dropped tremendously over the years. And you can see, the reasons why. I can see it clearly. You've got overcooked kibble with synthetic vitamins being sprayed on it, fortified. Anything that says fortified, those are synthetic vitamins being put on that food. So you've got overcooked kibble with synthetic vitamins being added to it. And then you have tap water. And a lot of municipalities, they're adding chlorine and bromide and fluoride to the tap water and other anti-corrosives that keep the pipes from corroding. But then we fill the dog's bowl with that water and then give it to the dog. And inside of that water has all kinds of things that may or may not cause cancer, right? So there's a lot of things that we can do on a daily basis that will mitigate the chances of us getting cancer and of our pets getting cancer. So, water quality is a huge one for us too, making sure the water is filtered properly, and then for our dogs as well. Then the type of food that we eat, making sure we're not eating foods with the food dye and with the added synthetic chemical vitamins that are added to it is fortified. You want to keep the highly processed stuff away. So there's a lot of things that, as far as awareness goes right now with MAHA, that I think are great. And if we were just focused on the educational aspect, not really the legislative aspect of it, like we're going to ban all these things, I think we'd be better off. But at the same time, it's like, who knows? We might be saving lives, by pulling fluoride out of the water in some areas. So
I think I agree. It's a conundrum because the awareness is great, the open
mhm.
conversation, normalizing that is wonderful. At the same
Yep.
time, any sort of heavy-handedness of banning or suppressing information, even when it's like, oh well, you've had your time that with these well, like, all right, like doctors be gone, scientists, you pro-vaxxers, like we're in charge. That's not a good. I don't know that that's a good strategy either, nor is it unifying, but that's just where we're at as a country.
But it is exciting because I see so many people waking up to the fact that vaccinations could be poison. We could be hurting ourselves. And I remember it was easy for me to accept that because as a kid, every year I'd get a flu shot. And every year after I got the flu shot, I got sick. And it was sick for 2 weeks. And I got out of school. And I remember the last time I got a flu shot, I was about 16 years old. And I got so sick. I was like out of school for a month. Like I was like, it was really bad. And that was the last time I got a flu shot was then. And I haven't had one since. I haven't had any other vaccinations since then. And I'm the healthiest I've been in my entire life. I haven't gotten sick in years. I can't even remember the last time I got sick. So in COVID, like I got a little bit of something, but it came and it went, you know?
Yeah, when I first caught COVID, I didn't know it was COVID. It was only as I was recovering, as I was feeling better, that a friend of mine suggested it could have been. So I took a test, and indeed it was, but obviously it wasn't so bad that
Yeah.
I was keen to take a test right away. And the past few years really have sparked, debate, not just awareness and education, but it's risen, I think, the public consciousness, not in the sense that everyone agrees and there's consensus, because clearly, that's been an issue where consensus has been forced or falsified. But we see, I think there's an element of that in really probably every industry, such as the food industry.
Mhm.
And one of, I think, the primary questions of our time in general is, do intentions matter? Do most people have good intentions? Do all people have good intentions? Everyone's the hero of their own story, yada, yada. But, I like to think that doctors have good intentions. I don't think that anyone would become any sort of healer with a desire to harm. Um, but how do we rationalize, like, okay, actually the other day a friend of mine said, oh, well, this fellow that helped me at the at the cell phone store, like, he wasn't as nice as the last one. I said, well, the last one actually screwed us over. He was very nice, but he was a scammer.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one, maybe she was a little cold, but I think she got the job done. And I'm kind of considering that approach when it comes to, well, for example, doctors, I suppose. They can have good intentions, but what is the result that's coming out of it?
Yeah, so I like to look at all of the reasons why someone does anything, right? My mind is like constantly scanning for reasons. And when I look at oncologists, it's like, are they doing it because they truly care about people, or are they doing it because there's some other ulterior motives? Now, I know when people, become an oncologist, they've just, they have a lot of debt built up, right? That they need to pay, and that job itself pays a lot of money. And the average salary is like 350,000 a year. Now, at the same time, it's like, what if that person, they have all this debt that they need to pay off, right? So they start making all this good money, and now they bought a vacation home, and now they bought a new car, and now they're going on vacations, and now they're doing all these things, and they're racking up more um, more debt, right? More obligations that they're having to pay out. So they need that money to come in. And every new cancer patient that comes in, every time they're giving a chemo and radiation treatment, it's like 10 to 15 grand that's coming into their facility. Not that their pockets themselves, but it allows them that lifestyle that they've created for themselves. So now they're kind of stuck in this, they have to have that money coming in. Like the whole cancer industry is propped up by these high cost treatments. And what would happen if these quote unquote cures or natural remedies, right? Because you can't patent this stuff, right? Anyone could grow a cannabis plant organically and then extract it using alcohol and treat their own cancer. What if the FDA came out next week and said, oh, hey, guess what? You know what? We were wrong, and CBD and cannabis can cure cancer. What would happen to these institutions? And I think that's kind of what the FDA was created for, and why all these former pharmaceutical executives are on those boards, is because they're there to protect their systems that have been built. And the pharmaceutical companies and their medicines, and they're making all kinds of money off this stuff. So I kind of see that as the main reason why this system even exists in the first place. And I'm not allowed to say that, hey, maybe the stuff that we make that's all natural can help with cancer. I'm not allowed to say that. But, you have the Seattle Cancer Care Alliance, and you can go there. And we've seen it. We've had a customer recently. Her name was Michelle, and she had triple negative breast cancer. She started taking our stuff. It started shrinking. Her oncologist in Seattle said, you need to stop taking that. We don't know, if it's effective. Anyways, 6 months later, like chemotherapy and treatment, she had lost 50 pounds. Her hair had fallen out, and she decided to go the assisted suicide route because she was in so much pain from the chemo and the radiation. So she went to Seattle, and they basically put her to sleep. It's crazy, but they told her not to take our stuff, you know, and just to focus on their stuff. And they were making big money. She had racked up $1 million in medical bills for her breast cancer. And I remember talking to her because she was best friends with one of my neighbors. And she had lost all the weight, and she was just in so much pain and just on the verge of tears. And she's like, I got all these medical bills. I can barely move. She had to adopt out her dog because she wasn't able to let the dog out anymore to go to the bathroom, and the dog was going in the house. And it breaks my heart that this is still happening to this day. Right now, there are people going through this right now all across the country. Their bank accounts are getting drained. They're getting put into medical debt. They're having to sell their houses and mortgage their houses. And then at the end of the day, they're in worse shape from when they walked into those buildings. They're in worse shape. And for someone like that to just decide to kill herself, basically, legally, it's just heartbreaking. So
It seems that we're seeing where this path goes, and in the case of assisted suicide, like, maybe it's inevitable conclusion, or potentially. But I think with assisted suicide, for example, we're seeing a really amplified version of materialism, really, because rather than treat the body as a temple, not everyone believes that, but treat the body as a
Mhm.
temple, for example, and explore nature's remedies, or just
Sure.
explore your options and not give up. It's that material end. Well, like I don't I refrain from using the word death, or like she died, he died. I say passed away, or I'll
Mhm.
say something like they've they've transitioned from the material to the spiritual reality, and
Sure.
it's like they've gone on a vacation, but they forgot their phone. Really though, like
Yeah.
that's how I see it. Because if you believe that, there is something beyond the material, and I don't mean to get preachy here, but that's just what I believe. And I think even if you don't believe that, if you just believe this is the one life we have, and there's nothing after this, why not make the most of the gifts that come from nature and that are, it seems, I don't know. Maybe it's a strong statement to say they were designed for us, but I think there's some wisdom
Mhm.
to what's already provided for us, what we're already tending to, and how beautiful, it's beautiful in essence, but also like beautiful aesthetically. Like I would make my dad that butterfly PT, and it's the
Yep.
bright blue. My sister actually introduced it to us, and it's like I would actually bring him bowls of flowers from the garden. It would be like a micro garden in the palm of his hand, and there were actually healing properties to some of those flowers, such as the
Sure.
roses. And truly, I think beauty heals, and there is a beauty in what you're doing. And interestingly, the name of your company, Botanical Enlightenment, I think speaks to the enlightenment, the education,
Mhm.
the mindset shift that drives your mission.
Yeah. So there was something that you said that I want to touch on is that your sister introduced you to the butterfly pea flower, right? She introduced you to that. And what you're doing and what I'm doing, educating people, letting them know that, hey, there might be some other options there for you. Or, hey, maybe, you should treat your body like a temple. What does that mean, right? Like, oh, keep your temple clean, right? You're not going to go litter in a church, right? You're going to make sure everything's clean and everything's neat and everything's organized, right? And it's the same thing in our body. You don't want to litter, you don't want to eat toxins. You don't want to, you're not going to put toxic waste in a church or in a temple, right? So, but most people, what I've found is they just don't know what they don't know. And that's okay, right? So it's up to other people to help open their eyes and say, hey, maybe there's another path out there. And we need more people doing it. We need more people sharing that, hey, maybe there's other alternatives that could be better and could be less damaging to your bodies. Or maybe you can, adjust your diet to where you can prevent some of these diseases that basically a disease means your body is not at ease, right? Dis-ease. And if you keep your temple clean, if you keep your body free from a lot of the processed foods and the toxins, environmental toxins, and the other toxins that are being introduced to foods and the chemicals, like maybe you'll live a healthier, longer life and you're not going to need some of these treatments that are out there.
And I
So,
think there's an intuitive nature to just knowing what your body needs. I mean, even in the example of my sister, like she brought the blue tea,
mhm.
not actually knowing that it had anti-cancer properties. We just thought it was really beautiful, nice gift, but something about it, just she was drawn to it. I looked up
Yep.
the flower, and then the journey kind of expanded for us, at least in the
She,
context of my dad's life.
she was tapped in.
Yeah, yeah, she might have been. And it's just those small windows to the abundance that we have in the
Mhm.
natural world. There's so much that we can still unpack here, and I think I'd love to do a part two with you centered on mindset, because I know that's really
Mhm.
integral to your relating to your clients and the origins of your company.
Yeah. So most people don't realize that they can make miracles happen. And it's not so much as miracles as magical things, but it's more along the lines of transforming your life and creating a life that you're truly proud of and that you're at ease and happy with, instead of a lot of people out there, they're miserable, they're depressed, they're on antidepressants. There's a lot in the mind that can control all of that. So I would love to come back. And if I could, my new book, The Liberated Mind, talks a lot about this. And I'm just waiting on Amazon to give me the thumbs up after the review so it can go live. So
Of course. And where else can people find you?
you can find me at botanicalenlightenment.com. That's our main website for our products. And then I am starting a podcast, and I'd love to have you on it as well. And it's called The Liberated Mind Podcast. So I've got 2 episodes up. I'm releasing the third one. Liberatedmindpodcast.com.
Oh, excellent. Well, an apropos title, of course. And I really look
Yes.
forward to part two. I mean, we're gonna do it in a few minutes since we've got a free night,
Awesome.
but for the purpose of our audience, I'll say stay tuned for part two. And if you have any questions for Michael, he is available. Likewise for me with regards to some plant medicine and herbal teas. And it's not just us. There's an abundance of information out there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you for coming.